Hey there, professor, look what I brought. Now tell me what's my rock. Okay, everyone. I managed to track down Dustin Dickens, who's a meteorite expert in Colorado at the laboratory for. I'm sorry. What's the name of
So
it?
the Laboratory for Meteorite Analysis and Classification, LMAC. It's
LMAC. Okay, and you're based in Boulder.
yeah, well,
Okay.
Loveland, Colorado, but we do all of our geochemistry and petrology work at the University of Colorado at Boulder and the
Okay.
microprobe lab there.
Got it. Got it. And yeah, I should say first of all, your name is Dickens, not Dixon. That's
Yeah.
Steve kept referring to you as Dustin Dixon. I think I'm not trying to make him feel bad. I think maybe he was nervous on camera or whatever. He just didn't make the connection. But
Yeah, and hey, I'm Justin half of the time too, so I
right, of course,
yeah, it's all good. Yeah, names are just names. It's all good.
it's all good. But I just in case anyone watching is like, hey, Steve mentioned this guy named Dixon, and you're talking to a guy named Dickens. I just wanted to clear that up. But you do know Steve, and Steve has
Yeah, I have. Yeah, yeah. We did
okay,
this. We did an analysis of his suspected meteorite, and
okay.
they even have the microprobe mount sitting way over here.
And I want to, I'm just going to ask you point blank. He said that you were with him, that you believe that he has a meteorite. He said that quite clearly in the video. So I'm going to ask you, do you believe he has a meteorite?
At this point, no. In fact, I'm certain. I'm certain it's not. However, initially, just looking, at the hand sample of it, and then also, I believe I saw at least an image or a screenshot of an XRF of some part of that showed it had, a certain percentage of nickel, and it was basically iron and nickel, and there weren't any other red flag elements showing up. So at that point, I had a pretty high confidence that it could be a meteorite. So, to his credit, I mean, I don't think he was, intentionally misconstruing it, and at that time, I don't know exactly when the interview took place, but there was a certain time where we both had pretty high confidence than it was. And then when I finally got it into the lab and was able to perform some very specific geochemical analysis on it and started to see the wide variety of mineralogy, that it became very clear that it was a slag,
Right.
that it was an industrial artifact of
Yeah.
some kind.
So just to reiterate, the original thing that perked you up was that there seemed to be some nickel, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, which
yeah,
if we're not talking about, refined, ores and slags and things that are happening in foundries, it's, pretty much iron nickel is gonna be sequestered at the center of our core, and, unless it came from a differentiated asteroid that was cataclysmically blown apart, and then part of that landed on the surface of our Earth. That's why when you see, an iron nickel alloy, taenite, camosite, in a rock that you found on the surface of or buried, pretty, not too deep or, still in the crust, it's probably a meteorite, but there are exceptions to that rule, and one of them is when it's a refined, metal, it's an industrial artifact, and, and then more and more as we started looking, at it, and I started seeing more XRF screenshots, and then the sample I got had no nickel in it.
mhm,
I'm looking at the report right now, and one of the points was just silicon and iron, and silicon's a pretty big red flag. Also, if you see,
yeah,
unless it's a stony meteorite, of
right.
course. And then the other one we had like 6.71% aluminum, 8% silicon, like 17.5% potassium, and then only 9.27% iron. So there was it became real clear real quick. And when I saw the BSE images, just the
BSC meaning
electron backscatter images that we use, take those off of the electron microprobe, and we use it to navigate the sample as we're doing the EDS and the WDS.
wavelength dispersive. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
which
perfect.
are which those of you who are watching, Dustin is talking about techniques that if you've been watching the show, you've seen us use this on the show. That's just sort of nerd talk for zapping a mineral and finding what elements are in it. So when you hear EDS, that's what that refers to. And the backscattering image is what we use on the SEM on the show, which is the images that are created by different brightnesses of the minerals based on their atomic numbers.
Yeah, exactly. And those metal ones, the opaques show up real bright and almost white, right?
That exactly, exactly.
And that's what we were focusing on when we were doing our ADS.
Right, right. Yeah, and I mean that's one of the, you know, most obvious things to focus on when you're looking at an iron meteorite is to look at those bright metals and see if they have nickel in them, as viewers of the show have heard time and time again. And on the show that he mentioned you on, he kept claiming that there was nickel in the metals. I never saw his original analyses. He said that he found nickel. He told you that, but then when we actually dug into it, we weren't able to reproduce it. I'm again, as I told Steve, maybe he found it, but he just needs to bring in the sample that has it. And I still haven't seen it yet. If we could figure out a way to reproduce what he found, I would completely change my opinion, as would you, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, well, but I wouldn't actually,
Oh, okay.
because yeah, just because it's not uncommon to find some refined nickel, and it doesn't mean that those are so usually early on in the solar system's formation, you're going to have under those conditions, you're going to have iron and nickel are going to bond very quickly and form that alloy. In this instance, they may or may not be forming an alloy, but just with like EDS and XRF, we're really not sure if we're seeing like free iron and free nickel, or are we actually seeing camosite or taenite, which is the meteoritic iron nickel alloy. And so just seeing nickel and iron in there, would I mean, again, it leads you to believe that, but there are many instances where you can see 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, 30, any percentage of nickel, and it still doesn't mean it's a meteorite.
Right.
So no, I wouldn't change my opinion on it. I would just say it would prove that everybody was being above board and like, putting their best foot forward, and nothing's being misconstrued or misinterpreted.
Sure. Sure. Well, I guess let me refine what I meant. I didn't mean that if we found nickel, we would automatically say a meteorite. I guess what I meant to say is that we wouldn't, if there was nickel, we wouldn't automatically reject it as not being a meteorite. It could move to further analysis. Maybe that's a better way to say it, right?
Yeah, totally, totally. Unless you have like,
And
big quantities of aluminum or big quantities of copper or some
yeah,
sort, really
absolutely.
red flags it straight out. Yeah.
There's a few transition metals that are compatible with iron and nickel. Maybe a sniff of cobalt here and there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Absolutely.
what else? What other elements might we expect to see as trace amounts in an iron meteorite?
Well, in an iron meteorite, gold, iridium,
Are they dissolved in the metal or are they separate phases?
no, they're
Yeah.
actually inside. Yeah, this is pretty much like so there's silicated irons, and oftentimes irons will have a little bit of silicates, inclusions here or there. But that aside, when you're just looking at the iron nickel, really, so for example, we can't even really truly classify an iron meteorite with EPMA, with electron microprobe analysis. We need to do a solution based. Well, so previously, in all the original classifications for iron meteorites were done with neutron activation, and that
Mm,
requires like literally bombarding a sample with neutrons, and
mhm,
then watching this thing decay over like a 3 or 4 day period. And you have to take a whole series of analysis for it. Unfortunately, uh, John Wasson or Wasson, not entirely sure.
Lawson.
Wasson, okay, who
Yeah.
you probably know. So yeah, you were at UCLA, so you were
Yeah.
there during most of probably at least the highlights of when he was doing a lot of his sort of refining of the classification. So John really developed the classification for iron meteorites, and that was all based on neutron activation. Because he's passed and he's no longer doing that, and nobody else really and it's hard to imagine this, but even in this broad, huge field, there's really nobody that I know other than Jason Utas. He's talked to me about maybe taking that back up. I don't know if he's done that yet. But really what's happened is we've fallen back on something that's almost as good, but which the data set wasn't based on originally, and, that's, oh gosh, I'm spacing on the
Oh, yeah, ICP-MS, right?
ICP-MS, yes. So, Chris Hurd, Dr. Chris Hurd up at Alberta, he's seems to be one of the, main guys kinda still, like, really pursuing this and starting to build these data sets together, and he uses a solution-based, inductively coupled plasma mass spectroscopy. So, anyway, that is the only kind of analysis other than the neutron activation analysis that will actually get a fine enough
Right,
resolution of
right.
those, really, really, obscure elements. So I can go in and be very confident with the, microprobe that we're looking at taenite or camosite, and I
Right.
can get a real nice texture. You can do the petrology, but to actually pinpoint, is this a 1AB or a 2AB or a
Right.
1E or that really requires the, ICP-MS analysis.
Yeah, so if I can just, help clarify that for some listeners, we classify iron meteorites based on, uh, elements that have very, very low concentrations. We call them trace elements, including things like iridium and gold and probably a lot of maybe platinum, I'm guessing, or maybe,
Yeah, there's some platinum. Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
um,
and that's one of the
so
variables.
so XRF, which is the technique that we use on the show, is not very good at detecting things that are, you know, below, say, a few thousand parts per million. To do that, we need a much more precise technique, much more sensitive technique. And the one that Dustin's describing is where we actually take the rock, dissolve it in acid, and then we put it through a plasma. And to make a long story short, that technique allows us to detect things down in the parts per million, parts per billion level. And meteorites are classified based on the concentration of these really low concentration trace elements at parts per million, parts per billion levels. If it got to the point where someone had an iron meteorite, we could say, as you said, we could say, yeah, you probably have an iron meteorite. We think you have an iron meteorite. But to actually classify, we'd have to go to a more expensive process.
Exactly. In fact, we'd send it to Chris.
Yeah.
We'd do some, get a little bit deeper and use the WDS, the
Okay.
electron microanalysis to confirm that we really do have tanite and or camosite, and then we would, say, "Hey, we got to charge you some more, and we're gonna send it up to Chris."
Sure,
It's gonna
sure.
take a lot longer now.
Yeah, well, great. I just wanted to talk to you. I wanted you to be able to speak for yourself, instead of have, Steve insist your opinion. I wanted to hear straight from you what you thought.
I appreciate that.
It's, it sounds to me like there was an arc in your thought on the rock that at first maybe it was, and that's probably where he was thinking about your opinion was early on in the process, but then later on when you dug into it, you changed your mind, which is statistically likely because it's so hard to find a meteorite in the first place. So
Yeah,
the
true.
my I mean my rule is that it's never a meteorite.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I see meteorites all day long, and I still have to sort of approach it that way because it's just statistically the reality of it. I say 99.99% of our submissions aren't meteorites, but I think that's being pretty generous, actually.
Yeah, it's probably true. And just quickly, just people are going to wonder, your background. You were a geologist, or would you call yourself a geologist?
Yeah, I would. So I don't know if this is a common term. I'm an autodidact. I'm self-taught. I've worked with several. Carl Ag from the Institute of Meteoritics was the first
Mhm.
person to take me under his wing, and first time I was brought into the to use the microprobe was with them, and then Aaron S. Bell.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's the,
RC.
among other things, he's the probe manager. He manages the microprobe lab at Boulder.
Okay.
And so, basically 15 little longer years ago, I thought I found a meteorite, and I went to Morocco and found out that meteorites were like you could have one, you could hold one in your hand. I just thought like every meteorite was the most rare thing on the planet, and it would be some, something that was in a museum no matter what, and every scientist would want to talk to you about it, and it would be a really big deal. I had no idea there was hundreds of tons of meteorites,
Mm.
all over the place, and they were coming out of the dry deserts in multitudes at the time. So anyway, I just fell in love with meteorites, and for the first 5 years, I just lost a lot of money and spent a lot of time, until I figured out I really, really had to pay attention to what I didn't know and
Right,
what I
right.
thought I knew,
Mhm.
uh, and then, bought a few $1,000 worth of textbooks and read them
Mhm.
and reread them and reread them, and,
Yep.
over time, got introduced to some of the people that were really experts in this,
Mhm.
and then begged them to teach me how to use the microprobe. And then slowly but surely, and then now I've classified over 100 meteorites,
Mhm. Cool.
and just finally probably mostly know what I don't know. I think
Okay.
probably
Sure.
not, because I
Right,
keep
right.
learning every day that I don't, but.
Well, but if you run into something, you know who to call,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, so you don't did you study any geology or anything formal
No,
in
I
high
was a
school?
technologist. I ran an internet services company
Okay.
for about 10 years prior to that.
Alright.
No, I'm
Alright.
completely self-taught,
Great.
geochemistry and petrology and mineralogy.
Perfect. I think that's great, and I think a lot of the viewers will find that an inspiring story because most people that get into meteorites are self-taught. They're doing research on the internet, but I like that you have dug into the peer-reviewed literature, and really dug deep in that in an authentic way. I try to encourage people to go to peer-reviewed literature, which of course isn't perfect, but at least it's been looked at by people who've seen a lot of meteorites, right?
Yeah, yeah, and short of Alan Rubin's book, Meteorite Mineralogy, I would say it's probably the only contemporary way to find out what's really going on. This is an evolving science, meteoritics. I should
Mhm.
say myself a meteoriticist,
Mhm.
and so really those peer-reviewed papers, which unfortunately are often paywalled,
Yeah.
so you can't really access them, and
Mhm.
I will be honest, without a background in geology or geochemistry, um, it's a huge hurdle. Like, you
It is.
really like, I've spent probably 10 years, in close to just I wouldn't say misery, but it was incredibly difficult, and I
Mhm.
went through 20 or 30 different learning curves every time thinking I really understood what I was, and I had to go back with my tail between my legs more than once,
Mhm.
feeling like I had made a fool of myself, like I didn't really understand it, and so it's a pretty big hurdle to get over to the point where you can get to this point. It's not impossible though, but you really have to like assume you're going to be in college level, graduate level learning
Yeah.
environment, because it really is remarkably complicated, and
Yeah.
it's easy to think you know it when you don't.
What you're describing to me feels a lot like the graduate school experience where you go in and you say a lot of things that are wrong until you stop. You say fewer and fewer things that are wrong, and maybe you're right.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to call you a homeschooled grad student. How about that?
Right on, I like it, I pick it.
Um, One thing I want to emphasize about these books, those beautiful books you have on your shelf there, to people. Uh, I know some people might be skeptical about expertise these days, but what is expertise in the meteorite world? Fundamentally, it's all based on our collective observations as humans of all the meteorites we've ever found.
Yeah.
They're all documented, I mean, maybe, well, most of them are at least are documented. You can read about them, and the best meteoriticists are the ones that know the canon, know the collective observations of humanity about these things. So it's not like people are sitting around in rooms thinking about things. Meteorites is a very observational science.
Yes.
Anyone can go see these meteorites. Anything that you read about a meteorite analysis is something that you can go do yourself and see for yourself. I mean, of course, that's easier said than done because it's not like we have access to all these meteorites, but
No, it's true.
theoretically, someone could come to your lab and look at one of your meteorites and see all the things that you see.
When we classify it for them, they're welcome to come into the microprobe lab with us, and I'm always open to sharing and even teaching if somebody's really really, really into learning it, and once, is willing to dedicate and spend the time, I it's my favorite thing in the world to do,
Yeah.
quite honestly. It's a pretty lonely environment, quite honestly,
Mhm.
'cause there just aren't that many people you can talk to at that level, and so when you start interacting with people that can, it feels really
Yeah.
good. But you brought up a really good point about how cumulative and observational this area of science is. There's, like, what is possible
Mhm.
and the fringe possibilities. And so one can say, well, yeah, of course it's possible, but is it probable? And does it fit within the known body of work? And does it fit within the existing nomenclature and diagnostic schemas and parameters of these different, very well understood and very well documented types of meteorites? And they're not just sort of willy-nilly, "Oh, because it has this, it means that." They really fit into these incredibly specific, slots,
Mhm.
and so, one of the things I get a lot is, "Well, this is new, and science hasn't discovered this." And usually what I just say is, that's awesome. I mean, but we can't verify that, and you're gonna be banging your head against the wall with every single person and expert involved in this, and that isn't how this process works. And I know it feels like you're being shut down, or people aren't they're not open-minded, or science hasn't gotten there yet, which the last part may be true, but there's a point where one can just take their stone in their heart of hearts, they can know what they know or believe what they believe. But that's different than having a mechanism to, diagnostically fit it into an existing nomenclature structure that then
Right.
is allowed to be published in the Meteoritical Bulletin and given an official
Sure.
thing, and where it's accepted by the powers that be. and
Mhm.
and it can be really frustrating for people, and I do completely understand that.
Sure.
But it's something that we kind of struggle with in this field of work pretty regularly.
I can imagine. For the record, you sort of implied, there could be a completely new meteorite that lands, right? That is previously unknown to science. Let's say it's from another solar system, right? Flying through the
Yeah.
universe. It lands. It's made of, I don't know, metallic aluminum and
Yeah.
chromium or something. You know what I mean? Like from a totally different system. But the hurdle for demonstrating that is actually a meteorite is
Well,
gonna be very difficult to overcome.
I tell you
And
what, yes, but what I don't mean to cut you off, but you're absolutely right. But so if that's found after the fact, forget it. It will probably never ever be accepted as a meteorite. However, if it's an observed fall, if it was tracked by our radar systems and it was part of an observed fall, a witness fall, and it was recovered right after then that's when all bets are off. It can literally have any mineralogy, any petrology, and provided it didn't come from like a burned up, space station or rocket or something like that,
right,
we have to accept it as a meteorite, and it'll break open, completely new things. And,
sure.
and based
It'll
on
be
the
exciting.
velocity, yeah, and based on the velocity and the nature of the orbital dynamics, we would be pretty clear if it was extrasolar or not. Also,
Right, right. But, I mean, that's the thing, there's so many levels of analysis, like, if I can go back to the after the fact, like, something that's fallen, you find it in the middle of Antarctica or something, and it's really weird. There are gonna be so many things that people are gonna ask for, right? They're gonna ask for the simple things like, what does it look like? Is there a fusion crust or whatever? Or they're gonna ask for the petrography, the textures, which is the appearance, but they're also gonna wanna see isotopic analyses.
absolutely,
They're
oxygen
gonna wanna
isotope analysis.
like, and they're gonna want a model for the formation. They're gonna want a theoretical thermodynamic basis for what it is that you're claiming. They're gonna want experiments that are gonna support the theoretical basis. They're gonna want, cosmochemical, astronomical models. I mean, there are gonna be so many knives out
Yeah,
to
yeah.
to pierce the bubble of this idea that it's gonna be very difficult for an amateur to do that, much less a professional. A professional is gonna have a
Oh, yeah, you're talking about, like, 20, 50 different teams all working on it, and
yeah,
that hurdle might not be quite so high as to get it classified,
Mhm.
But then this is the other thing that a lot of people tend to maybe look over or not really understand is that I I often talk about meteorite classification as the janitorial work of meteorite analysis and planetary science.
Uh,
Because it's just the very, very beginning. It's establishing that it is in fact a meteorite and what looks like an incredibly thorough job of analysis and classification. But in reality, we do just the absolute bare minimum to get it into the right classification and be certain that it's a meteorite.
Mhm.
And then from there on, there's all sorts of different researchers and teams of researchers that are doing all sorts of different types of analysis to help us, because meteorites are there to help us figure out the planetary science. From a scientific perspective, they tell us so much about our solar system and
Mhm.
even about the Earth and about early dynamics of the solar system and so planetary accretion and differentiation processes within the crusts and the cores and so anyway it's really easy to think that like everything has got to be put into these classifications and in truth they're really almost the most bare minimum amount of analysis and then the real stuff starts like in my opinion. I mean, and I'm being a little self deprecating here because it is hard work and it is an important type of work. However, it's not even the beginning. It's not even close to the end. It's really just the bare,
Right.
sort of the bare minimum beginning of the process of studying. I mean,
Well, I mean, you can see this in the literature. There'll be one meteorite, 100 publications on it, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, absolutely.
I don't even know Allen Hill's meteorite. That's a lunar one. Is that Martian? That's a Martian meteorite. I wonder how many papers have been written about that one meteorite, you know?
Oh, Black Beauty. So I think Carl Agee did that one, and
Yeah.
yeah, and originally they thought it was a carbonaceous chondrite. It was really weird.
Right.
It's a regolith breccia.
Right.
For example, like Amgala 001 is a Martian meteorite, and I just for the first time I just did my first work for JPL and NASA, and
Mhm.
did some uh, mineralogical characterizations of it of two thin sections for that, and we did X-ray mapping for them and like, it's not like NASA and JPL don't have the capacity to do these things, but it's a distributed process, and
Right. Absolutely.
I didn't classify Amgala, they didn't classify Amgala. It's a group effort, by many, many different researchers, and it may never end. We're still doing research on meteorites that have been found and being studied 100 years ago.
Well, absolutely. As we develop new analytical techniques, that opens up new ways to look at old things. That happens routinely. And one thing I think I want to emphasize for the audience is that I like the way you're describing this ongoing process because at every step of the way, and this is hard for lay people to understand about science, but at every step of the way, every scientist is looking at that meteorite with a critical eye, right? And they're always reading the previous literature, wondering how the previous people could be wrong. And that may seem cruel and that may seem rude even to people, but that is the core of the science.
And contentious. I get all the
Yes.
time, "Oh, they got called out and they just got their butt handed to them," and it's like, "No, that's really not at all how it works." They're quite happy that I mean, inside, I'm sure it might hurt a little bit to know you got it wrong. I mean, but just recently, a new Martian meteorite, and this is kind of on the QT, so I can't really get into the specifics, but it was this new, like, a relatively rare Martian meteorite, a very, very well-respected, totally on the money, researcher did the analysis and classification of it. He got the mineralogy completely spot on. It looked so much like this particular type of igneous Martian that they didn't because it's really hard to get oxygen isotopic analysis right now. There's only a few people in the world doing it, and it's the line's really long, and it's not always necessary for Martian meteorites. So
Sure.
they opted not to do it. And then later, someone else did the oxygen isotopic analysis, and then another person that does some age dating in Japan went and said, "Hey, some of this data is looking a little bit more like lunar, and it looks nothing like any of the lunars. We're really used to lunars being these like highland breccias, these feldspathic breccias, but there are these basaltic, lunars. They're just rare and they're not very typical of lunars like as our sampling goes.
Hmm.
And lo and behold, the oxygen isotopic analysis came back on what's called the terrestrial fractionation line, which really there's only three types of meteorites that show up as terrestrial. Well, only three types of rocks that show up on the terrestrial fractionation line: Earth rocks, Moon rocks, and then these things called enstatites, or there's a couple of ungrouped achondrites that also fit along those lines, but they're basically formed where the enstatites are formed from the enstatite stuff. So anyway,
Okay.
absolutely, the nomenclature committee at the Meteoritical Society approved this as a Martian. So
Hmm.
really smart people that are gatekeepers for like for the geochemists and petrologists,
Right.
experts. They're like, hey, here's the write up. Everything looks great. Yes, Martian. We're gonna, got its own number, came up as Martian, and now it looks like it's probably going to be reclassified as a lunar basalt, and a new one, a
Wow.
total type, and petrology's all the same.
Right. Wow.
It's just
Wow.
geochemistry is a little tweaked.
Sure, sure. So, I mean, that's such a great story because these are like professionals. These are academics, PhDs.
Oh,
Well,
yeah, and I mean, these are like
science.
just the top of their, I mean, these people really like these are the people I learned from and that I
Right.
still learn from on a regular basis. And
Yep.
they're
Yep.
like, "You
Oops.
get it wrong sometimes."
Absolutely, and that's normal and it's good. It's part of the process. So, don't feel bad out there if you have something that you thought turns out to be wrong. So, it's totally normal. It happens to everybody in the scientific pursuit. Um, thanks for talking about Steve's Rock with us. And I wonder if we might have you back to do maybe some special episodes on identifying meteorites and maybe common errors people make and how you identify meteorites using your techniques. Maybe meteorites that you found, and maybe we'd have you back for that.
Absolutely, I'd love to. I really appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Dustin. And again, this is Dustin Dickens with the Laboratory for. Could you say it again?
It's the Laboratory for Meteorite Analysis and Classification. We've gone through 3 name changes. It was Colorado Center for Meteoritic Studies. Before that, it was the New Mexico Institute for Meteoritic Studies, and we were associated with, the IOM, with the Institute of Meteoritics, and then we moved and started working, on our own, and so now we're LMAC, Laboratory for Meteorite Analysis and Classification,
Okay,
and
great. And how do people? What's the URL? What's your website?
It's meteoritic.com or meteoritic.org. And if people
All right.
just want like a visual and they can't make it to your show, we also do a visual analysis
Hmm.
at geolabs.com.
Okay. Oh, so they could send you pictures and you
Yeah,
say
they
what
take
you.
pictures. We give an official report. As you know, it's non-diagnostic. It's just
Yeah.
an opinion.
Hmm.
We charge $50 for that versus 500 for a full analysis. And again, 99.99% of the time, we do not recommend EPMA analysis on the
Sure.
segments we send. So we
Sure.
it's a gatekeeping mechanism basically. And
Correct.
on these
Correct.
sites, I can plug the if you don't mind, I mean, I
Sure.
can plug Top Meteorite, which I we also sell meteorite specimens and sell
Okay.
jewelry made with meteorites. We have
Oh.
pendants with pieces of lunar and
Oh.
Martian and
Okay.
iron meteorites. And that's how I fund what I do. I'm an
Okay.
independent researcher, and so Laboratory for Meteorite Analysis and Classification and Geolabs are all. It actually costs us about roughly $300 to $500 in probe time to do these analysis, and I probably get paid like, I don't know, if I look at how much time I've done,
Don't do it.
it's definitely not a profitable endeavor for
Okay.
us.
Okay.
So Top Meteorite, we're on Instagram, we have our website, topmeteorite.com, and everything's authentic and guaranteed and verified. That's how I survive is with that.
Sure. Well, this has been a great conversation, Dustin. I hope we can do this again. I think people will enjoy this conversation. And sorry, Steve, again.
Yeah, sorry.
We're
I
not
wanted it
ganging
to
up
be a
on you.
meteorite. I did. I mean, I'm always hopeful, and I always,
Yeah,
try to put the positive vibes forward.
yeah, it's all good. It's all good. I like to see people getting excited about rocks. So, and there you go.
All right. Hey,
Do
thank you
you,
for
do you
having me.
Hey, thanks, Dustin. It's nice meeting you. By the way, it's our first
You
meeting.
as well.
So
You have a
great.
great day.
We will see you. Take
All
care.
right. Bye bye.